What do you get when you're in multiple timelines where there's a demonic castle in the dark woods of Transylvania that is being ruled by the demonic overlord known as Count Dracula, a vampire, and he constantly battles a family of vampire hunters throughout those many different centuries? What do you get when you combine all those together? A classic franchise. And what do you get when a man takes that same formula and gives it a bit of a twist in order to appeal to a new generation, or pretty much to older gamers alike? A franchise revolutionaire. And if you guessed Castlevania and Koji Igarashi, that's exactly what we're talking about. By the way, happy St. Patty's Day, everybody. This is Double RPG here, and welcome to another exciting and stellar episode of the Riff Table Arcade. And joining me this time around, once again, is my good friend, 16-Bit Jeff. How are you, buddy?
I'm doing good, and a happy St. Patty's Day to you as well.
Oh, nice. Are you wearing your green today, man?
Yes, I'm wearing my Green Lantern shirt, thankfully.
I'm wearing, I hate to say this, but I'm wearing my Minecraft shirt that has the creeper on it.
Nice.
So, I mean, that's the only thing I like about that game is just the creepers, just the, the design of them and the concept of what they do. That's why I find them to be pretty funny, basically.
Mm-hmm.
And the first time when I showed my mom this shirt, she said that it actually kind of looks like the face of like the sad face of an English bulldog, and I was like, what?
Okay.
Well, it's just because I used to give a bath to a couple of English bulldogs that my mom's boss, where she works at. Her boss had a couple of English bulldogs. I used to give a bath to on a weekly basis for extra income. So that's why she kind of that's where she got the similarity from, basically. Right. But yeah, it was a good deed and all, but times have changed and I'm no longer doing that anymore, which is kind of a shame because I do need the extra money,
Mm-hmm.
But I know there are better opportunities elsewhere to earn extra income, even if it's not, like a job or anything like that. But yeah.
Right.
But other than that, yes, I am wearing my shirt today that has the creeper on it. So that's good enough St. Patrick's Day material for me. So happy St. Patty's Day, everybody.
Mm-hmm.
So how have you been, my friend?
I've been all right on my end.
Anything new and exciting in your world right now?
Nah, not really, to be honest.
Yeah, me either, except we got a lot of good games coming in this week.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm sorry I had to remind you again, since your birthday is coming up this Thursday.
Uh-huh.
And you're getting one of those games that's coming out this week, and I think I'm getting about 4 of them.
Mm-hmm. Nice.
And some of you might know what I might be picking up, and some of you may not. But, I won't go into too much detail, but let me just say that most of them, they look pretty awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Especially the one that's coming out on Friday.
Yeah.
So, yeah, be on the lookout for that. So, maybe, who knows, I might do reviews on those games at some point. Well, some of them, but not all of them, because there's one that I still feel is kind of tricky to do a review on, since there's a longevity period of a certain game, how long it goes. So, taking time to review that kind of game is a kind of a undertaking. You know what I mean?
Fair enough.
It's like how Nightwing 01, our good friend, when he reviewed Final Fantasy Lightning Returns Final Fantasy 13.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. You gotta admit that his review on that was pretty in depth and very informative, and you could tell he did put in a lot of work with playing through the whole game to get a genuine impression of it.
Well, in that instance, he had to. I mean, after all, it was an RPG. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. I mean, when it comes to RPGs, they're a very rare breed for people to actually try to tackle. I mean, kudos to those if they figure out a way. I mean, for me personally, I know it was very, it was a very daunting task and very time consuming to do that kind of stuff, or to do that kind of thing. And I may get back to it at some point. I mean, the last one I did was Birth by Sleep, but that was about 4 years ago, believe it or not.
Wow.
Yeah. So who knows what I may have up my sleeve. I'd like to do one on Earthbound someday. Which would be pretty sweet, since I could get back to something a bit more retro.
Well, thankfully you'll be able to nowadays with the game being available on Wii U eShop nowadays, which is good.
Mm-hmm. You're exactly right about that. But anyway, we can talk about that all we want to, but let's get on with today's show. How about that?
That sounds good.
Yep. Anyway, and this news, it actually came out as of today, rather, which is we've been looking for a topic for about the past week. Originally, we were going to be talking about the reveal of Batman Arkham Knight for the PS4, Xbox One, and PC that's coming out later this year. But since we've been having some scheduling issues, and it was getting with every day passing by, it seemed like the more late we've been with that, trying to get a Riff Table Arcade episode up, that we just kind of decided to pass up on that. So we found something that was a bit more recent and something that's to our liking, and we have a lot to discuss about it and to reminisce back on this particular series and, see where the future holds from there. But anyway, as I mentioned from the beginning, if you know about Castlevania, then hats off to you. And for those of you who know who Koji Igarashi is, give you kudos on that too. But the main topic for today is that the man who introduced the Metroidvania style of Castlevania games since Symphony of the Night, known as Koji Igarashi, has announced that he has left the company Konami to form his own independent game studio.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and this actually came quite a shock for a lot of us all, because we haven't really heard of what Koji Igarashi has been doing, or Iga for short. We haven't really heard much of what Iga has been doing ever since after he completed Harmony of Despair, which released back to mixed to average reviews, which, some people liked it and some people didn't, but some people thought, that with him, after that game, that was like the last one he would be attached to. But, it was kind of hard to know what he was doing at that point, except we did learn that he worked on a couple of Xbox Live Arcade games, but after that, it was just kind of, where are you, buddy? We really need a new Castlevania game from you, but then this comes up, and it's like, oh, wow.
Well, yeah, it's still possible, but we have to admit that I think the reason why is because it wasn't really his fault, but let's face facts. The Castlevania exclusive fighter, Judgment, for the Wii, did a lot of damage to his reputation in regards to that franchise, you know what I mean? He didn't really have part in developing it, but he was part of the developing team, so, he was basically Konami's golden god next to Kojima in that respective franchise, you know what I mean?
I see what you did there.
And
Golden Gun, 007 reference.
Pretty much. And basically, I look at Konami these days as just being Kojima's dungeon, so...
Oh, of course. And Castlevania Judgment, I forgot about that game. No, I think what it is, why a lot of people dislike that game, was because of how inept Iga is when it comes to 3D games in general. Because when you take a look at his back history of 3D games in the Castlevania franchise, there were only about 3, including Judgment, and that was Lament of Innocence for the PS2, which I thought was an okay game. It wasn't, it wasn't mind-blowing, but it was okay.
Yeah, it was really good, I thought.
Mm-hmm. And the other is Curse of Darkness, which released back in 2005.
See, that's the funny thing. It's just like we look back, and it's not going off to the top, but both Castlevania 64 and what was 64's sequel for Nintendo
Legacy
64?
Well, it was a prequel. It was Legacy of Darkness.
Yeah, thank you.
Which a lot of people considered that to be the best one out of the Nintendo 64 era.
Yeah, that's true.
Because it polishes up many of the bugs that were had with the original Castlevania 64, which ironically enough was included in Legacy of Darkness as a fixed-up port of the original.
Right. But what I was getting at is just, when I look at those two, excluding the camera, which was the real issue of those two games, for a non-Iga 3D-centric Castlevania to be the first two titles, I thought they were done really well. And even the Iga-centric Curse of Darkness and its predecessor, Lament of Innocence for the PlayStation 2, I thought, and Xbox, were really good 3D titles.
Well, Lament of Innocence was PS2 exclusive.
But the successor was both PS2 and Xbox. That's what I meant to get at.
Right.
But besides that, I thought those first 4 entries into 3D were good. I really don't get why the fan base would say they were bad, because they were clunky. I don't really think they were clunky, but that's a topic for another day. What I'm getting is this. I respect Igarashi for what he did for the franchise, and I love what he did for the 2D space in regards to the franchise. But there was one thing that I knew he was. He was not only an outspoken person, but he was really a controversial person as well inside the franchise. Particularly what he did to the timeline after, I think it was a couple years after Castlevania Legends release.
Oh yeah, about some of the titles getting retconned.
Yeah. Like, I know this wasn't said verbatim, but I remember what he said was that the reason why he got Castlevania Legends off the timeline as not as a canonical game was because he didn't like the main character, Sonya Belmont, being a female vampire hunter. Which I really find hypocritical and just weird, because during that time when that game came out, which was 97, there was a franchise that debuted here in the United States that was written by a largely feminist yet amazing writer by the name of Joss Whedon. That was Buffy the Vampire Slayer. And look how that franchise turned out. I just see it as a double standard. I could kind of see why, due to but financial gain. But at the same time, that does come off a bit sexist. I'm not saying that he is, but you can understand how people interpret it.
I understand, but in my take, Jeff, I don't think it was... I really honestly don't think it was necessarily for financial gain. I think that may be a bit too wide stretch. What I think it is that when you take a look at the Castlevania games, there was already like there was already a set... a select group for male vampire hunters, and those, male fighters who fought against Dracula, known as vampire hunters. Well, there were those within the females who used magic to fight off Dracula and his minions, and they were known as the Belnades or the Benaldes clan or whatever.
Right.
So there was already a set foundation. So that I believe he was trying to keep. He was trying to keep things consistent within the timeline, so that way things wouldn't deviate in terms of, like, narrative or whatever. I mean, that's just my opinion.
No, I understand where you're coming from, and that does make sense, but it's just, to me, it just feels like that comes a little off-putting. Again, I'm not accusing him that was, but I can understand why people thought that was controversial, what he did back then.
Oh, of course, and not to mention, Castlevania Legends was actually probably the best Castlevania game on the Game Boy. On the regular Game Boy, that is.
Yeah, the original Game Boy, the old black and white brick.
Yeah, basically.
Actually, no, not black and white. Pardon my French. I meant gray brick.
Well, black and green, basically.
Yeah, the pea soup look that it had.
Yep. Anyway, and based on Koji Igarashi's departure from Capcom, not Capcom, but Konami, he also loved this quote, and Jeff and I were talking about this earlier, and we believe that the whole talk was based on, a good standing and not like a bad standing between him and Konami. So this is what Koji had to say in regards to him leaving the company he was once a part of and starting things anew, like Keiji Inafune with Concept, basically. But anyway, here's what he said. I've decided to break out on my own to have the freedom to make the kind of games I really want to make. The same kind I think fans of my past games want as well. Leaving Konami was a big decision, and not one I took lightly. I've spent my entire career there, made many friends, and had a lot of great opportunities, but I hope all the gamers and fans who have supported me in the past will join me in being excited about what comes next. Wish me luck. So, as you could tell, it definitely does seem like it was on a good standing, or he left on a good note from the company, and not like one that's controversial. Because when you take a look at like big name third party publishers or developers nowadays, it seems like their best muscle when it comes to game development, it seems like it's been more along the fact that seems like it's been based on like bad blood between someone who's really good with game development against a major publisher of some sort. You want an example? Take a look at people believing that when Robert Bowling left Infinity Ward after Modern Warfare 3, Basically, he said that it was Activision and said that it was possibly on a good stand. It was on a good standing, but when you take a look at that recent interview he had before his departure with Machinima about DLC, a lot of people speculated that it actually could have been on bad blood.
Yep.
So yeah, that's really the kind of thing that, you know, it seems like it. I mean, of course, when it comes to developers and publishers, there's different standards between the two factions where you see that the publishers have more of the upper hand. But, you know, it's like that's one of those unions it's like one of those two sides where there hasn't been like a joint union, which is really hurting the game industry as of today.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so it's good to know that with Koji Igarashi's stance that it wasn't based on bad blood or on bad terms. It was really good, and, you know, we definitely wish him all the best of luck with what his new indie studio is working up.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Mm-hmm.
Now, we were talking about this earlier, too, and I wouldn't say that you were afraid about potential future 2D Castlevanias being made.
Uh-huh.
However, I do see that, and like we said, we do speculate. We're not insiders. We don't know anyone from Konami, so we can't say this was concrete. But we do believe from that statement that he just said that, you know, their leaving was on amicable terms, unlike what happened with both Capcom and Keiji Inafune a couple years back.
Right.
But that being said, I do think that the Metroidvania style is going to come back, but it won't be under Igarashi. It'll be under someone else. But I still could see that if this leave was under good terms, I could still see him come back as a creative consultant at least. Granted, he didn't create the series, but at the same time, he did create that style.
He did create that style that was a good evolution in the franchise, which definitely Castlevania needed at the time, because we've been seeing this side-scrolling fashion, which they're not bad games, but you know, being stuck on that type of style of gameplay could, you know, tend to make the series a bit stale. But
true.
But when Iga came in to be like the assistant director or whatever for Symphony of the Night, that's when 2D Castlevania games still had a strong stand, because, you know, you could take something from a franchise, give it a twist, and it can turn out to be for better or for worse. And with Iga's case of what he did, it actually turned out to be better in a lot of people's eyes.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, don't get us wrong. I mean, we still love 2D side-scrolling Castlevania games where they're extremely linear, like the old one, or like, you know, from the original and Super Castlevania 4 and Bloodlines and Rondo of Blood and those kind of games, and even Dracula's Curse on NES. But, you know, it's always good to know that there's always something else to be had, or something different within the gameplay mechanics, to where you can where you're actually presented with a different challenge. Instead of being strictly linear, there's also that non-linear approach with how you can complete a game, basically. That was Iga's style of how he made Castlevania games since Symphony of the Night. Well, the 2D ones anyway. And of course, there was some 3D. There was the 3D games that he worked on. I felt, while they weren't as mind-blowing as the 2D games, well, maybe except for Lament of Innocence, but the one thing I felt that those games kind of failed on was because they tried way too hard to emulate the Metroidvania style a bit too much. It's like they didn't even try like the Devil May Cry approach.
Right.
With while it's a good game, but most of it was, I guess you could say, it just wasn't like sophisticated or streamlined, basically. But yeah.
Right. Yeah. No, I definitely get where you're coming from.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, from what I've heard, I haven't had a chance to play Lords of Shadow 2 as of yet. But I did hear that Metroid style of backtracking did make a return in a bigger approach, which is always a good thing, I think, because that's one thing. Well, yeah, that's why the term Metroidvania existed, because the backtracking ideology came originally from the Metroid franchise, but it was improved upon on the Castlevania titles from our generation, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And it's always great to see. I like backtracking in the sense when it makes sense. I don't like backtracking when it doesn't. Like, it's forced in there. You know what I mean? I can't say that it is in Lords of Shadow 2 because I sadly haven't played the title yet. But I'm really enthusiastic to play because I heard some really good things about the game. But being said, in regards to the future, I can still, and this is going back to what the big head over at Konami Europe is. I forget what his name was. David Cox.
Oh, from Mercury Steam?
Yes, he says he didn't say that 2D isn't profitable straight out, but he did say from the way he sounded that he believes that it can still coincide, but it wouldn't be as big as the 3D entries. I tend to disagree. Like, I get where he's coming from, but in the whole run of it, I think those two can coexist. You know what I mean?
Right.
I can see a 2D Castlevania exclusive title, like for say like an eShop for the Nintendo eShop or PlayStation Network or even XBLA. Hell, we saw it a couple years back with the title you mentioned earlier, ironically, with Harmony
Despair.
Harmony Despair, yeah.
Well, that depends on what Konami has to say, because it seems like when it comes to digital releases, it just seems like that they haven't really been that too fun with Nintendo devices as of recently.
True.
I mean,
Take a look at example, you know?
I know, but take a look at how Mirror of Fate sold on the 3DS. It didn't really sell as well. Instead, they ended up being remastered in HD for the PlayStation Network and Xbox Live Arcade.
Yeah, true, but at the same time, that went in regards to advertisement as well, too. Not only I'm blaming Nintendo on that, but I'm also blaming Konami that because they didn't even push the game from what I recalled. And plus, let's face facts, most of the fans, diehard of Castlevania, when they hear the words Lords of Shadow, they just go, I don't want to say snide, they just don't like the take us as saying that's too much God of War, which I think is hypocritical, because God of War in some ways was inspired by Castlevania. When you think about it, really, you know what I mean?
When I think about it, yeah, I could definitely see what you're talking about.
Like, I think the term God of War clone is really, it doesn't make any sense because everything is a clone of a prior successful IP. You know what I mean? You really need to look at the merit of the game itself, not what it was inspired by. Like, for example, Bayonetta. People are gonna say it's a DMC clone, Devil May Cry, which is hypocritical because it's made by the same guy who made Devil May Cry.
Of course.
You get where I'm coming from, right?
Yeah. Oh, yes.
Like, see, that's the funny thing. It's just like, say, like, they said it's too much God of War centric. I like it because, and this is not going against what Igarashi did for the franchise, but it felt to me, in regards to Lords of Shadow, with both its direction in regards to story and especially the art design of the game, it felt like it was a true return to form of the franchise. You know what I mean? Like, I did respectfully admire what the Japanese team over at Konami and what Igarashi did during his tenure when he started right off the ball with Symphony of the Night.
Right.
But I felt like, while those games went for that gothic feel, I liked the fact that the Lords of Shadow games were more heavily inspired by the European horror feel that you saw, like, in various Hammer horror films of, like, the 60s and 70s. You know what I mean?
Well, and the more I take a look at it, I think that the games based on, well, the Lords of Shadow games, they kind of remind me more of the Crusades.
Yeah, like a mixture of a lot of influences. That's what I'm getting at. But yeah, but going back to Igarashi, it's like, it's weird that he's leaving because it's kind of a coincidence that he announces it a couple days right before his big
GDC presentation.
Yeah, which if I recall correctly, I think that is gonna be live streamed. I would have to check it, but if it is or not, we'll post it in the description for the video. But it's weird that he announces it right before his big panel. You know what I mean? Sure, it's not like at the 11th hour he's doing it, but still, it's weird he's doing it the week off. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, because it makes you wonder if this decision came a month before, and that Konami didn't tell him, like, okay, you can't say anything for a month until you do some press or whatever. You know what I mean?
Huh.
We really don't know, but I am really intrigued to see what his future is, because I'm bound to suspect we'll hear something from that panel at this year's GDC.
Right.
Whether it's Castlevania related or not. But at the same time, I'd like to hear what his philosophy on how he designed the Metroidvania titles from 97.
Oh yeah, definitely.
When was the last one that came out? 2010, right?
No, that was 2008 with Order of Ecclesia.
No. I'm saying the Harmony of Despair.
Oh no, that came out in 2011 for Xbox Live Arcade, and then a year later for PSN.
Okay, it was 2011. So yeah, it's just like that was a nice. I'd say that was a nice, healthy reign that what he did with that franchise. It's
more like a swan song.
Yeah, but I'm saying when you look at it as a whole, from 97 to 2011, that's a very impressive reign on a franchise, especially one that you made relevant once more. I'm not saying that Castlevania wasn't, but Symphony of the Night, when it was released, it did kickstart the franchise's heart once more. No pun intended.
Yeah.
But
yeah, I know what you mean.
But it is going to be interesting, like for the sake of the series' future, because it's gonna be weird, because going back to Lords of Shadow 2, we've heard that this is Mercury Steam's final game, and whatever next 3D title they're gonna do for the franchise is gonna be done by a different developer. Now that's the question: which will come first, a brand new 3D title for the Castlevania franchise, or a new 2D title?
I don't know.
And the more I think about it, it probably would be a good idea that they would release another 2D title.
Yeah, they do need to go back to I mean, this is like the current 3D title we're getting out of Castlevania. They need to get on with making another 2D game at this point.
Because here's the thing, like, I'm not trying to say that 2D is a quick buck, but comparing 2D games to 3D games, at least a 2D game will be easier, it'll be less resources, and it would be a quicker time to develop than, say, a full-fledged 3D title, you know what I mean? And you would probably able to do a lot more for 2D title than, say, a 3D title for a PSN or an XBLA for the budget, you know what I mean?
Well, anyway, let's go ahead and let's shift gears a little bit and talk about the Castlevania series in retrospect, and we can deliver the one game that we particularly liked within both the classic and Metroidvania style gameplay, or even the 3D ones, and talk about the one that was our least favorite.
All right.
So I would say out of the classic games, my favorite. While I do like Castlevania 3 Dracula's Curse on the NES, which I think is definitely the best one out of the whole trilogy, I say that my favorite has to be Super Castlevania 4 on Super Nintendo.
Good title.
Yes. Now, why did I like Super Castlevania 4? Well, I think pretty much a lot of people who liked it said that even though it does go back to the roots, I mean, it still maintains the roots of the first game, but the thing is that it actually experimented with new gameplay ideas to improve the experience more, and it even improved a lot of the things that people had wrong, that they felt were just kind of, well, not necessarily wrong, but just kind of cheap and frustrating, with like the jumping and like getting hit by enemies and that kind of stuff. And they even improved the mechanics with the whip, and you can use it to attack in all directions, and you can even swing on objects or appendages where you can actually hook the vampire killer to swing onto ledges that were far away, and you could even make the whip go limp, to actually just waggle it around, which has been a staple, which has been one of the staples in the future of the 2D Castlevania games, as well as like I think what was the other thing that? Well, no, not that. But the other thing is that whole thing with the whip, where you can whip in 8 different directions. That was the only time, or I mean, that was the only game where you could actually do that. No, there hasn't been another game that did that ever since, and I could see why it wasn't included for future games because of that. Because with that feature. It actually did make the game a bit more easier. But at the same time, it's like, if it's easy, if it makes the... it doesn't... I feel that if it doesn't matter if it's easy or not, if they still implemented the challenge and where they make the gameplay mechanics good, then that's all right. That's how I feel. But them removing that feature, I have to say, either it was the best move or it was a risky move.
Right.
Okay, now, but overall, Super Castlevania 4, still my all-time favorite, and I still play that game fully. I would say about once or twice a year. It's like my game. It's like one of those games I have to return back to and complete fully, like A Link to the Past on the Super Nintendo, but I can do it on the Virtual Console, on the Wii U, or the Wii for that matter, but mostly on the Wii U now, since it's available. Now, my favorite Metroidvania game has to be... Oh, that's a really tough one. My favorite Metroidvania game, I would have to say it's a tie between Portrait of Ruin and Order of Ecclesia. Now, don't get me wrong. Symphony of the Night, I think it's a great game, but I just feel that there were certain things within that game that haven't been perfected yet.
Right.
But it's just with newer games that came out, with the Castlevania games and the Metroidvania style ever since Aria Sorrow in terms of gameplay, that's where I felt that things were, improved for the better.
Right. With
newer ideas being implemented into new installments of Castlevania games ever since then. And the ideas that they had for both Portrait of Ruin and Order of Ecclesia, they were definitely some of the best. Portrait of Ruin, it was the first game in the series where you actually had a partner with you at all times, because the game was set on two characters working together to stop Dracula. That's a series first. And some people may say that it might make the games a bit more faster and a bit more shorter, but it's just, the thing is that sure, with Jonathan Morris, you can use the vampire killer if you wanted to, but it wasn't at its full power, but you could still use the other weapons that the other characters in the series could actually use. So it wasn't like you were restricted to just using the vampire killer at all times. Jonathan Morris, on the other hand, felt like an all-rounded character when it came to his weapon choice. And the other thing is, you had Charlotte Allen, who was more of the magic user, who is relatively from the Benaldes clan, or the Belnades clan, who are the magic users. Well, Jonathan Morris, or ever since his father from Bloodlines, are related to the Belmont family in some regard. So yeah, there was that thing where both what felt like a Belmont and a Belnade were working together to defeat Dracula. And the other interesting thing about Portrait of Ruin was that you could actually go into portraits of landscapes or whatever that held the different agents of Dracula who you had to defeat in order to get access to Dracula himself. Or if you wanted to go by the game's storyline, you were going up against Bronner, who was the head lord of Castlevania, but you realize that he was actually being manipulated to bring about Dracula's return. Now, the other game, Order of Ecclesia, I have to say, for a longtime fan who enjoys challenge, I think they really hit the boat in the right direction with Order of Ecclesia. Some people were kind of getting tired of... I guess you could say they were kind of getting tired of the Metroidvania games on the GBA, not GBA, but DS, because of the enemies looking similar and some of the bosses were kind of reused. But Order of Ecclesia, they really did everything from scratch. Basically with the enemies and the bosses you went up against, and even the bosses were freaking tough. You had to use your wit in order to defeat them, and you had to study their patterns with what they did. So it really brought back that trial and error approach that the older Castlevania games, the tougher ones, were best well known for.
Yep.
So that's why I really liked it, and even the story was actually pretty good too, especially where I I think it was the first Metroidvania game where you actually control a female protagonist for once, Shinoa.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so it was good to see there being a bit diversity in heroism for once, or for there to be a female protagonist. So yeah, that was definitely a first as well, and it was good to see that game actually made a comeback to not only the challenge, but some elements from the past installments, like that whole map system. It kind of reminded me of Castlevania 2's Simon's Quest, which gets a lot of flack for it trying something different,
Exactly.
but there were elements that actually kind of felt very good, like it was kind of harkening back to Western RPGs, much like Zelda 2: The Adventure of Link.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I kind of took that approach while keeping intact what made Castlevania great to begin with. But, yep, those are my favorites. Before we get on to the one that I did not like the most, why don't we hear your favorites, Jeff?
In regards to the classic series, my personal favorite was the one-time Sega Genesis title, Castlevania Bloodlines.
Ooh, good choice.
It was the fact that I liked the fact that it gave you an option to play in regards to Eric Lacard and what was the other character?
John Morris.
John Morris. I liked the fact that it gave you not only a choice but also had the difficulty. If I recall, like in some ways, John Morris was the normal mode while Lacard was the easier mode of the game. I like the fact that it was showing more of its horror roots, like it did before. But I like that this title was more inclined to the original Dracula book by Bram Stoker.
Yeah, and even and not to mention too is that there was speculation that John Morris was related to Quincy Morris, basically the doctor or whatever who knew how to put Dracula down in the Bram Stoker novel.
I love the
like Van Helsing in a sense.
And there's one thing I loved about the game was the art design was phenomenal. I thought it was the most beautiful Castlevania game that I not only saw it back then, but I still say it is today. You know what I mean?
Not to mention too, it was the first one where it wasn't all it was the first game in the series where it was actually kind of gory.
Really gory. But then again, that was because I think Sega wasn't too lenient unlike Nintendo. You know what I mean? Nintendo did let some developers get away with a lot of things during that era, but that was one key thing that they would not let their developers do. You know what I mean?
Right.
And that was, I think, that the reason why that Konami went with Sega with that title, for the sake of it. But if there's one thing that I like too, this was also one of my personal favorite soundtracks from this series too. And ironically, this was also the first soundtrack to be composed by Morichu Yamane, who also composed Symphony of the Night and the other titles in the franchise that would be under Igarashi's reign as the sole, not the sole developer, but the head developer of the games.
Right.
And that's the reason why it's one of my personal favorites. In regards to the 3D space, that is really tough.
Oh yeah.
I would say that as much as I like this in Nintendo 64 titles, and I would say, just to put this as an editorial note, I do think they do get a really bad rep. Not the fact of us fans of the franchise, just because the people who have done it so many times say it's a bad game. Point in case, AVGN and his fan base, because if they believe, if anything, if there's one thing they believe in, that he has God and every word they said is true, and that everyone's wrong.
I know a lot of people are like that with some other games that I actually like, and what they say feels like they believe that it's the freaking Bible in their eyes.
It's ironically bringing it up, and I just want to point out I have no animosity towards James or the creation that he did as the AVG, and I like his stuff. I've been a fan of his since he started, when he was still known as the Angry Nintendo Nerd. But besides that, I don't get why he thinks these games are bad, but I don't think they were that bad. Case in point, also with Castlevania 2, Simon's Quest, which ironically was the first title I actually played. I never had a chance to play Castlevania 2, Castlevania 1, mainly due to the fact of the year I was born in, which was 88. I never had a chance to play like the very first games until I was older. Like for example, I never had a chance to play Super Mario 1 when I was a kid. Or The Legend of Zelda 1. Like my first games in that franchise were the ones that were different, i.e. terrible. Which I think it's funny because since those were my first titles, they aren't my favorite, but I do appreciate what they were trying to do, like to change the formula even back then. But getting back to the topic at hand, while I do like the Castlevania 64 titles and Simon's Quest, my favorite 3D title has to be Lamont of Innocence.
Okay.
Mainly because of not only it was the first 3D title that I felt like that actually got the combat right. Like the feel and flow of it, you know what I mean? Like, as much as I like 64, there's one thing I have to admit, in that while the combat works well, even on the 64's controller, it really felt off, you know what I mean? It felt slow, it felt clunky. With Castlevania Lamont of Innocence, it felt like it was smooth, it felt like it was fast-paced, it felt like it was a combat focused heavily on Devil May Cry, and ironically, like we were talking about earlier, this was called the Devil May Cry clone originally when it was released.
Right.
Which I think is ironic because, like, once again, creator Hideki Kamiya, I think, if I recall correctly, he even said that he was a huge fan of Castlevania and it inspired most of his action-heavy based games.
Oh, of course.
So it's just like, I don't get why you say, oh, it's a clown. It's just like, oh my god. But besides that, it's also another thing too I liked about the game. I like the art design. Not the characters, but just the overall environments, like from the Bernard Castle to the well overexposed area that's encompassed inside the castle as well too. I think this is one of the recent Castlevania titles that when you see the monsters, they are really grotesque. I'm not saying in grotesque as in Silent Hill levels, but they are grotesque in their own unique way. Like, for example, the Forgotten one, the hidden boss. That didn't give me nightmares, but it kind of reminded me back to when you first saw Beelzebub, the hidden boss in Symphony of the Night.
Right.
Or I forget, that Legion-like boss, that big ball of, what was that boss called in Symphony of the Night?
Oh, the one with all the, with like all the zombification parts.
Yes.
Oh my god, I know what you're talking about, yeah. Yeah, and that boss has made an appearance in other entries in the series as well. But yeah, I definitely know what you're talking about, where it had like 8 different sides that you had to defeat in order to get to the core of the boss, basically.
And not only that, but there was one thing I liked about the game. And this may sound ironic because I've heard a lot of this even from diehard Castlevania fans. I liked the story. This was a prequel, but to me, it was like, it felt like it was a prequel that was really successful. How this whole conflict between the Belmonts and Dracula came to be. Granted
that Dracula was not even mentioned in the game. It was, but we do know who actually turns out to be Dracula in the original timeline. Exactly. But yeah, it was Matthias Kronkvist, I think that's what his name was. And I think, I don't think it was Death, but I think it was another vampire who was actually taking control of that castle before Kronkvist took the throne of Castlevania.
It was Bernard.
Yeah, it was Bernard.
Because he was the one that turned Leon's girlfriend into a vampire. And that's how the vampire girl came to be. Sorry for the spoilers, but this is a 10-year-old plus game.
Of course.
But yeah, it's just like, this is, I felt, the first... I'm not saying that the Castlevania titles in the past had lackluster stories. The ideals were good, it's just the presentation came off a little clunky. Not only in, obviously, voice acting, but just overall storytelling. Like, they weren't bad because they were bad stories, it's just how they were presented. But besides that, it's one of my favorites. I still play it today, and I'm glad that it's at least available on the PlayStation Network. I can't say.
Oh yeah, that's right. I forgot it's on PSN. I still need to pick that up at some point.
I would love to as well, but I don't know if its sequel, Curse of Darkness, is also available on PSN. I would have to check that out when I get a PlayStation 3 again later in the road. But besides that, I talked about the class. I talked my favorites in the classics. I talked my favorites about the Igarashis. Did I talk about my favorite Igarashi Metroidvania titles? No.
No, but I didn't talk about my favorite 3D Castlevania game. I kind of kept mine short.
Okay, cool.
So.
But with Iga, like with the Iga-centric Metroidvania titles, my favorite. Oh God. In regards to Iga, I would say Order of Ecclesia.
Okay.
And it's the fact, like, I liked the style. It's sad. It's kind of was like you said. It was sad that was Iga's swan song in regards to his run on the franchise before his leave. But this game came out in 2008. But besides that, I like the art.
It was also Michiru Yamane's swan song for the franchise as well.
That's right, because that was her final title and composing this series, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's some of the best music she's ever made for the series. Like the opening music, Dusk's Holy Mask or whatever, Dusk's Holy Mark or whatever.
Yeah.
One of the most iconic pieces in that game, and the series in general.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing, and I'm not trying to sound hypocritical, but there's a lot of reasons why I liked about Order of Ecclesia that I'm not trying to sound hypocritical, but I'll explain later why I didn't like Area Sorrow nor its sequel, Dawn of Sorrow.
Okay.
It didn't feel like it was like too anime-ish to me. It felt like under Iga's wing, he was trying to take that series back to its roots in regards to Order of Ecclesia. When you look at the character portraits of how they were designed to just overall feel of the game. You know what I mean? It felt like it was a true return to not only the Metroidvania style, but also design-wise, the characters and overall world. It felt like it was a return to what they were trying to do to bring back the flavor of the classic series.
Mm-hmm.
Yamane's score, I think that was, I agree with you. I think that's one of the best scores I've heard in the series. And I think it's going back to what I just said about the 3D title, Labana Vincent's. It's also the story too. I like that for once in the series, you see a character that's, granted, yes, she's female, but at the same time, she's a strong character. That's not like the stereotypical like take we see of female characters out there portrayed in games. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So it's a lot of things. It's a lot of things, but I really like that game, and I really hope that's one of the titles that's going to be re-released later down the road for the DS to Wii U conversion from Nintendo.
Oh yeah, I'm definitely looking forward to that whenever that day comes.
Right.
Okay, very cool. Now, of course, I said I didn't have a favorite 3D Castlevania game because, well, can't really think of any at the moment.
Right.
But I will say that probably my least favorite has to be the second game that came out on the GBA, and that was Harmony of Dissonance.
Oh yeah, that one. I know what you're talking about.
Why do I say it's my least favorite? Well, while it does go back to the Metroidvania feel of Symphony of the Night after Circle of the Moon, which I thought Circle of the Moon was far more superior.
Oh yeah.
But the thing is that with Harmony of Dissonance, it felt like it didn't feel like it didn't really it didn't improve upon the formula of Symphony of the Night quite well.
And it felt like it was a step back.
Yeah, it was a step back. And the thing is that, well, I have nothing against playing as a Belmont again, which I think that was a pretty wise choice. But the thing is that it just, with Juiced Belmont, you just only had the vampire killer on you at all times, and it seems like he didn't really have that much to do. He didn't really have that many things about him that made him stand out among than those who had their own unique abilities. Like with Alucard in Symphony of the Night, you could actually do those transformations into Mist or a bat or even a wolf for that matter. With Soma Cruz, you actually could capture the souls of monsters and use them to your advantage for different types of moves. With Jonathan Morris and Charlotte Allen, they had their own abilities that were a part of their character jobs, to where they could actually combine together to actually do some really unique abilities. And the other thing is that with what is that other one? The other thing is that with Shinoa, she could actually manipulate runes or whatever in order to, get the job done of what she had to do, basically.
Right.
So yeah, with many of those characters in the series having their own abilities, I just felt that Juice didn't really do a whole lot to stand out from the rest of them, or to make them, or to make him in the same boat as them. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And not to mention that the soundtrack, I felt that the soundtrack was kind of a mixed bag, and I felt that the story, while it was good, I didn't think it was that groundbreaking, and it's just the overall presentation. It didn't even feel that very. It looked kind of ugly.
Right.
But then again, of course, it goes back to GBA's limitations when it comes to portraying the light or the brightness and the shadows of games, and since things were mostly lit up, that's why I felt that Castlevania or Dracula's Castle in Harmony of Dissonance didn't really look as scary as it did from before, and from the later games as well.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but if I recall correctly, wasn't that also the reason due to the fact that that game was also extremely rushed by Konami?
Yes.
Okay, so yeah, that explains why it was like that.
It was rushed because Iga, because he didn't even think Circle of the Moon was good, despite him showing very good fondness towards the game's defining feature, which was the card combination system, or the DSS cards.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it was a rushed product, and I'm glad that he took his time with the more recent installments of the formula. But it's just with Harmony of Dissonance, it just felt rushed.
Yep.
Basically, soundtrack quality was bad. The whole level design with the Dracula's Castle was okay, but just felt bland.
So when your hair gets long,
And it just kind of felt uninspired, you know what I mean?
Right.
But yeah, that's my least favorite in the series. So, Jeff, what's your least favorite?
My least favorite, and I just mentioned it prior in the earlier segment, but my least favorite was Area of Sorrow. And it has nothing to do with the game particularly. The game's gameplay, I gotta say, I think it's really good and still holds up strongly today. My problem with it was the story. I know it sounds hypocritical of me, but thinking about it, it's just when you find out who Soma really was, I gotta say, and this may sound like I'm a little bit like a child, but after I found out who he really was, after that confrontation with before the final boss, I was like, okay, I don't care. I'm not gonna finish this game. This is completely stupid. And just to put a spoiler again, this is somewhat of an old game, but I don't care. I'm gonna say it. You find out that Soma is in fact the reincarnation of Dracula. I'm sorry to say this, but I thought that was completely out of left field. That it made no sense to me. Let me put it in perspective. They did the same twist in a recent title with Lords of Shadow. To me, that made more sense because of what Gabriel Belmont went through in that whole title. You understand why he went against God and why his transformation from the former brother of Light Crusader to what is known as the biggest baddie of all time, Dracula, made sense. Whereas in Area of Sorrow, it's just like, okay, he's a reincarnation of Dracula. We couldn't think of anything else. Sorry, there you go. It felt like it was a good idea, but to me, the execution felt it was rushed. You know what I mean? If it felt to me, if they actually gave a little bit more time to plot out the whole story, it would have made more sense. But just with the final product of how it is, it felt unnecessary to me. Like the twist itself, you know what I mean?
Now, based on your perspective, Jeff, which do you think is probably the more weaker, Aria of Sorrow or Dawn of Sorrow?
To me, I can't say, because to me personally, I think they equate each other out. Because how I feel about those two installments. Again, I'm not saying that they're bad games, because the gameplay is good. Excluding, I will say this with Dawn of Sorrow, I did not like how they implemented the dual touchscreen.
Oh yeah, especially when it came to after the boss fights.
In that
I
respect,
felt that was.
I will say it is the weaker of the two, but to me, in just core gameplay mechanics, I say they equate each other out personally.
Well, gameplay mechanics, I felt that Dawn of Sorrow didn't really do that much to improve upon Aria of Sorrow.
I meant to say the
Aria
game.
of Sorrow.
I meant to say the game's installments themselves of how I personally feel about those two.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
But yeah. And again.
Yeah. So what were you gonna say, dude?
I would just say again, like, I'm not saying that they're bad games. It's just, to me, just because of what went through and just through something that just felt so out of place to me. I know story isn't supposed to be the big thing. It's really story and gameplay that should equate each other out, but you need to have a good story to feel complied to get through the whole ordeal, you know what I mean?
Right.
And it's just like, I know it sounds crazy to me to do that, but really, that's the only game I haven't completed in the series. I know it feels like I'm forced, but I really can't go back to that game because of what you know. You know what I mean? What perspires in that game, but I just want to explain why.
Right. Of course. Okay, so basically those were our most favorite and least favorites. Now, the final thing I want to talk about before we close off this episode is, where do we feel that the future of the franchise is going to go now that Iga has left?
Well, since you're the host, I think it's proper you go first, man.
Okay. And Jeff and I were kind of talking about this. Since Iga left, and it seems like what he said was on a good note between him and Konami, it's probably best to say that there is a possibility that he may return under like either a contract or under creative consultant terms on future installments of the series in the original timeline. I think that can definitely work, but it's probably going to be on Konami's decision that they're going to be having somebody else to be Iga's successor for the future of the series. So I feel that's where it's going to go. If Iga is going to be working on what many fans are probably speculating at this point is going to be his spiritual successor to the franchise. Mm-hmm. So, I definitely think that's where, at least for the original timeline within Japan, from Konami of Japan, I think that's where it's going to go. But after Lords of Shadow wrapped up its story with Lords of Shadow 2, it's kind of hard to know where the Western side is going to take the series as well.
You know what? I wouldn't be surprised if for the Western side, like, if they keep the timeline intact in Japan, but for the Western audience, they would probably do a complete reboot. You know what I mean? I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah.
And now, I'm not saying that they're gonna do, like, I'm not saying for 3D exclusivity. I'm saying for possibility that it's gonna be both 3D and 2D, kind of like what Mercury's team tried to do with their trilogy with both the PS3 and Xbox, releases with both Lord Shadow 1 2, but also the 3DS. Originally, it was a 3DS exclusive. Now it's digital exclusive with Mirror Fate.
Right.
I don't think it's gonna be. It really consists of if it's gonna be a continuous timeline. But there's one thing I'm hoping, if they do reboot it for the Western audience, I hope at least it's an anthology. Like, with each installment, you play with a different bloodline inside the Belmont clan.
Right. I mean, who knows?
And to be honest, this is just from my perspective, but if they really want to kick it off right, and since how it worked beautifully in a title we just mentioned, I think for the first title, if it's gonna be a full-on fledged reboot, maybe it'd be a smart idea to start off their franchise with a female protagonist.
If you mean for like if she was a part of the Belmont clan or the
Yes.
Really?
Yes.
That'd be interesting. The mother of the Belmonts.
Very much.
That's got kind of a good ring to it when you think about it. Yeah, that could definitely work. Or they just start. Well, they could just start somewhere else from scratch if they wanted to. I mean, if they wanted to start back from the roots of like how every Castlevania game was released, if they wanted to start with the first one and bring about their own vision with how they see the first game, then I'd definitely look forward to see what they have up their sleeve with that one, how they would portray Simon Belmont in a reboot way, you know what I mean? Now, there's also one other thing I forgot to mention too, and I want to give an honorable mention to this game being one of my least favorites. Is that Jeff? Do you remember the arcade exclusive Haunted Castle?
Yes.
Where it had Simon Belmont as the protagonist in that game. You want to know why I tend to dislike that game? It wasn't because it was hard, but it was because of the walk cycle animation for Simon.
Oh, yeah.
Looked like he had a broom shoved up his ass, basically.
Yeah. like you say, he looked like he had a broomstick stuck with his pooper. Me on the other end, it looked like he was really constipated, to be honest. So I get where you're coming from. Yeah.
Stuck up his pooper. Now I remember. It was originally somebody said. I remember somebody saying in one of the videos on YouTube where they have one of the songs from Haunted Castle, which I think was the one from the first level, but was remixed in Portrait of Ruin. It was said that it seemed like Simon Belmont looked like he just came out of the bathroom or whatever, and he had to.
See, I'm the complete opposite. To me, it looked like it was really constipated and needed to go.
Oh man. Yeah, I just wanted to give a mention of that because we haven't even mentioned Haunted Castle, and that didn't even cross my mind from before.
Okay,
no,
okay,
but like I said, Haunted Castle, it had good music and good remixes to the older games, but
Sadly,
you know,
the only good thing about that release, right?
Right, and not to mention that game was pretty hard, pretty difficult too. But anyway, after we said everything that we had to say, I think we pretty much have come to a close with this episode. Don't you think?
Pretty much.
Yeah, that was a pretty good talk because with this being kind of in light of what happened from today, it was definitely good to bring this up to everybody's attention. So it's kind of like this is probably the earliest with information we got from a news piece that we have delivered to you for the Riff Table Arcade with our own 2 cents and such. So, yeah, and with all that said and done for this episode, I think we can go ahead and we can close this off. So, anyway, guys, we hope you enjoyed this episode of Riff Table Arcade. And from the Game Riffers, and to sign off, I am Double RPG.
And I'm 16-Bit Jeff.
Any plugs before we go?
You can check our stuff up at youtube.com/thegameriffers. I'm still working on my end with both Command Break, which should start probably mid this year. But if you're interested, my YouTube channel is still active, yet there's nothing on there yet, sadly. But there will be later down the road once I acquire a capture device.
Uh-huh.
But if you want to follow me, you can follow me on many social media sites such as Facebook, Twitter, Tumblr. For example, twitter.com 16bitjeff. So, yeah, you can check me out at a lot of places besides hearing our lovely voice on this channel.
Okay. And for me personally, I'm still trying to get back on work with my next review, which is Beautiful Joe, by the way. And the other thing is too is that I'm about to get back on track with the Wonderful 101 with my LP because I've been needing to get back on track with that. I would like to get that finished at some point, and not to mention that I've been kind of taking a look at other games that I've been wanting to LP as well, mainly kind of like side projects, and I've been kind of thinking about wanting to do the Ace Attorney games as something on a weekend type of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And besides, I went back and played Dual Destinies on the 3DS, but the main one that I went to was the DLC episode.
Yeah.
So I played through that all. Gotta say, it was actually pretty enjoyable. And it just kind of makes. And since I got me some new video editing software to use for my 3DS and DS gameplay, which Adobe Premiere has been really strict on, or not really strict, but just been really finicky with how it tries to put 3DS and DS video capture on its site. I've decided to use something else as a different measure, and that's why you've seen my recent video about my recent 2 cents video on my YouTube channel with Yoshi's New Island gameplay in the back, because I used Sony Vegas to help me out.
All right.
Yeah. So, actually, no, it wasn't that. It was actually no. Actually, it was from Windows Video, or not Windows Video, but Windows Movie Maker originally, and then I just made the video as it was, and then I just made. Then I just rendered it and then put it back into Adobe Premiere. But now everything that's 3DS and DS related when it comes to video capture, it's going to be on Sony Vegas. Right. So yeah, be on the lookout for that. And who knows, maybe I'll have some reviews planned up in the future for my handheld catalog as well. But anyway, guys, that's it on my end. And as we always said, thank you for joining us for this episode, as always. And we'll definitely catch you next time for another very exciting episode and very enthralling experience with what we will have on Riff Table Arcade. So anyway, guys, take care of yourselves, and we'll see you next time. Peace.
Later.